Well, back in 1995, the former World Bank Vice President, Dr. Ismail Seral Gilden, said, if the wars of the century were fought over oil, the wars of the next century will be fought over water, unless we change our approach to managing this precious and vital resource. And that's precisely why we have gathered here today. This is a conference that has been convened by the Water Institute of South Africa, Wisa. And of course, our media couch today is hosted by the Water Research Commission in partnership with the Mail and Guardian. Over the next hour, we'll be speaking to various industry experts. They'll be sharing their insights on various topics, including the state of water in this country, to how then we can begin to turn the tide in securing this precious resource for generations to come. My name is Cathy Mohlahlana. I'll be hosting the media couch over the next hour, and you'll get to see quite a number of experts that will sit right next to me on the couch. Without wasting any time, let me welcome our first guest then. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for your time.
Afternoon, Kathy. Thank you for being here.
Dr. Lester Goldman is the Wisa CEO. Dr. Goldman, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and good afternoon to the listeners.
Jennifer, I think the important place for us to begin this conversation is really perhaps getting a sense of the state of water in South Africa. What is the state of water? Because our understanding of the state of water is what we see, right? We see communities holding protests, they're complaining about the quality of water, they're complaining about the fact that there's no water and water scarcity issues. But what is the real state of water from the Commission's perspective?
Thank you very much for that. I think it's a very important time in the history of our country to really reflect on the state of water. So before we move there, we have to acknowledge that irrespective of whether you have a cup, you have a mug, you have a bath, you have a sea, you have a dam, that's a resource. Whatever comes in there and whatever lives there, it's part of the resource value chain. So we have got pockets of excellence when we're looking at our state of water. Particularly, we know that most of our municipalities would provide drinking water. It has to meet SANS 241 across the board, and it has to obviously contribute towards health of our people. So looking at the green and the blue drop, yes, there are those areas where there's dismal performance in that regard. And so you have got a mixed bucket. But what we have not gotten right is to learn from each other, to partner the best and the weak so that there can be one way movement and that is forwards. Then we look at the resource where we're saying the source of water. A lot of people will think, oh, groundwater is different from water in the river, or what we call surface water. It's one resource. We have done the research, so one fits the other. And how we exploit that has to really contribute towards the state, which means how much is available. So we need to be cognizant that
Mm,
there are areas where you'll have lots of rivers or very what we call perennial rivers that flow all year round, that water is available. But then we have areas where all we have is groundwater and we cannot see
mm,
it. And there are areas where, climatically speaking, looking at the geophysics and the geology, there is no water. That is why you have places where what we call desert areas, that are places with constrained availability of water, like the Northern Cape. So we also there have a mixed bag where there is areas where we've got availability, there's areas where we don't have availability. But in terms of the state is what we make of it, right? I think,
mm,
Lester, that becomes important.
Yes.
How we treat just your toilet paper that you wipe or your face tissue, how what you do with that contributes to the state of water.
yeah.
How much water you use to wash your car contributes to the state of water
Mm,
availability.
mm,
So we have to look at the availability, we have to look at the quality, and we have to look at the effluent, which means the waste part of it. What we used to call waste, we no longer call it waste. We refer to it, and it's a new global term, used water. And how you treat that used water determines the state in terms of what you have in terms of water.
It's such an important point that you're making, Jennifer, because it's saying that our outlook around water should not seek to grade water as in to say some water is more important than others. And that's what we've come to do today, because we regard the water that comes out of our taps as being more important than the water in the stream,
Yeah.
as being more important than the water that sometimes is part of the effluent that you're referencing. Lester, your own view of the state of water in this current country currently?
Yeah, I think our plenary had sufficient speakers who, from a professional perspective, raised concerns, um, and I can only echo those concerns. It's time we move beyond just the planning and the strategy phase and look at implementation. And I think Minister, addressed that elephant in the room. So certainly throughout the value chain of supply of domestic water, we need to start focusing, upon these Achilles heels, and it seems to be at local government level.
Mm,
Um, and so I think this conference is part of, again, bringing a number of stakeholders together, a number of partners who are saying, what do we do to, impact and change the implementation of some of these
mm,
plans and strategies.
mm.
And then really that's what I think this conference is all about.
Do you think that our challenge has been around the plans and the strategies, that we have not had sufficient plans and strategies? Have they not been implemented? Where is the issue? Because more and more, one does get a sense that we are confronted with a water crisis.
Mm.
But if we're to pinpoint what has created this crisis, what would you say that has been?
Yeah, I think, I mean, Minister addressed those issues earlier. I think certainly the plans and the strategies have been around and abound for a long period. Um, it's in the implementation that we seem to have a challenge. Um, and I think as professionals and especially the research organizations and so forth, the technology and the ideas and the planning has been around. Prof. Kesson, I think, put a bit of context as well when he looked at from an international perspective. So the challenges we face in South Africa are challenges that other countries, even developed countries, face. And when one understands that context, then it really becomes more of a focus of what do we do differently.
Yeah.
We can certainly borrow from and borrow to these international countries, best practice and technology and so forth. But our
Sure.
challenge here seems to be more at more at the political will and the leadership
Yeah.
perspective. And I think that's what we're really here to discuss. Um, how do we impact leadership, governance at the various levels to achieve greater impact?
Jennifer, what is being spoken about here, I think, is quite important. Often in South Africa, we tend to feel like we are the only ones that are going through the problems we're going through. The issue of water and it being a scarcity and water being in crisis, it's a global issue. And that should change our perspective and how we view ourselves in the context of that issue.
Definitely important. So I always say people that have lived their lives in suburbia, what we call township, and in the cities tend to, they got really spoiled, right? Because
Yeah.
you've never had one single shutdown of water a day in your life, because you your rand waters, your Mahali's waters were treating and maintaining and operating for a small community, and then the shutdown didn't happen. Our population has grown in the cities, the demand has grown, and we have not shifted how we used water 50 years ago. We just open a tap and you just go inside the house to do something and whatever. We don't realize that there's now, back room dwellers. There's more people that are still demanding from that same resource. There's no additional rain that has fallen. In fact, we have realized that we are having very different patterns of weather. We cannot even be very certain in some cases. So really, it's around our being spoiled and being used to abundance. The second part is that if you were to ask somebody from the rural areas, they would say to you, what's the problem? They appreciate that one tap that is close to their yards, because previously they used to travel far to find the water. So we need to start taking stock as individuals, as communities, as South Africans, to say we don't have additional source of water. Therefore, we have to use this sustainably. I always make an example with Namibia. Namibia is an area that is a desert. There is no water. But the people in Namibia, you don't hear them complaining all the time. They have adapted, they have utilized technology, they are recycling, they have gone all this path because they acknowledge their challenges. I think here at home we are quite spoiled, and we need to change our attitude. If it doesn't rain for a whole year, for 2 years, we need to still make means with what we have
Yeah.
to make sure it goes the long way. So we are very quick to complain. I mean, recently I laughed when Rand Water shut down for maintenance and
For
operation,
maintenance,
and
yes.
everybody was just so complaining. And I said,
Yeah.
but we have to have maintenance. Unfortunately, these days, because of the large volumes that comes out of their pipes, then they had to do the shutdown. Because also of the load shedding that we have, the energy crisis that we have, then they had to do the shutdown. So we have to change our attitude towards availability, towards abundance, so that we can maintain and manage the water sustainably. I keep saying, while government is there, municipalities is there, we need societal buy-in. We need to act as citizens and be concerned when you see somebody vandalizing a pipeline,
Yeah.
because we must understand now it's leaking from there. They're taking a pump or whatever, but in 2 days later you will not have water. So we have to be concerned. We have to really protect the assets of this beautiful country of ours, and all of us must act and be active citizens.
And the point that you're making cannot be overemphasized, right? Because it's so much easier to blame government and
Absolutely.
failures of implementation without then also taking a look at ourselves
Correct.
and the responsibility that we play too. And with water, it's a responsibility we can't absolve ourselves of.
Yeah.
But changing this perception, that seems like it's the hardest thing, because the only thing that seems to move us as citizens or residents is it's when now there's a looming day zero.
Mm.
Go to municipalities, day zero is around the corner. Everybody now starts to panic. People are using less water, being a lot more conservative. But once we're out of that moment, it looks like all of the
It goes
measures
back.
that we're using are thrown out of the window, and it's back to normal programming. How can we begin to change the culture that we have developed as a society that is actually very wasteful around water?
Yeah, look, I think certainly this is why we're bringing professionals together, because we understand our role, and where necessary, we will hold, those, we'll hold those who should be held accountable, we'll hold them accountable.
Mm.
But I think as citizens, we need to ask ourselves what is our role in it, and how do we change this culture as individuals and as families. And I think quite rightly we saw this during the Cape Town Day Zero, where most households could get to under 50 liters of consumption per day.
Mm.
Compared to, I think, our current national average of around 273 liters per household per day. It's absolutely just
That's
ridiculous,
more
you
than
know.
double.
Uh,
It's more than double.
yes, when I think the international average is around 173. So
Sure.
certainly, whilst we are pointing fingers, we also need to, understand our role as individuals and as communities in that. Um, Even if you are not wasting water, if you see water being running down the street and some, report it.
Mm,
We all have a role to play in ensuring that we do not waste water, and it must become a bit more of our culture within South Africa.
Jennifer, just to wrap it up, when we talk about turning the tide, what must we anticipate the future to look like that we have to start planning for today? From the academic of officials like yourself that are a central voice in the sector, and on the other hand, from those that are on the other side, as regular consumers who don't have the insights that you do, who don't deal with the data, but who are going to be equally affected by the changes that need to happen.
I think in the main, we all have to acknowledge that water is everybody's business. We have to seriously change our culture around it, similar to what we've seen with the energy crisis, right? One of the key areas is to ensure that we embed it in our curriculum from as early as possible, going forward, and in your higher education and all of that, and making sure that also civilian education around water, it takes center stage. And we have to start also, as the officials that are working in the water business, we need to understand there is no sleeping and time to idle. The imminent crisis that you talk about has created opportunities for us. We need to be reskilled, we need to be upskilled, we need to be relevant, we need to be doing the work now. We need to be thinking around climate change, which has brought on a different challenge just from your day to day and your normal challenge. We need to capacitate others that are in the water business through training, through vocational training, through in-work training. Organizations such as Wisa, they are focusing on that to make sure that we are trained. but also we have to pay for our services and understand that for operation and maintenance to take place, the bulk of that, legislatively speaking, must come from paying for
Yeah.
water services.
Yeah.
A lot of people will get very frustrated if you lost your phone today, you go buy another one tomorrow. And yes, we understand there are indigent people, there are struggling people, but almost everybody has forgotten that this resource that we're talking about, it gives life. That's the only thing that if you don't have, apart from oxygen, you probably would die. But we are quite very easily forgetful of our responsibilities. So I think we need to go back there. We also need to be able to really, as a society, be open to new innovation, new technology, and we cannot have a one blanket fits all approach. It has to be fit for purpose. So if you are living in a community and you're told that your source of water is groundwater, let us demystify it. It has to be meeting sans 2 for 1 for you to drink it. It's the same water, it's the same resource. So we also have got these superior water, inferior water. We have got all of these analogies that are going around that we need to really correct and make sure that we are all on board in understanding that we have to safeguard water. Lastly, young water professionals are a key component of society that now we must also partner with them, have them really contributing to the discourse because they are the leaders of tomorrow. They have
Absolutely.
to be the ones that are taking, that are living in the time when we probably will not be there. And I believe that once we all take up our roles seriously in this business, we really will ensure that we have got a water secure country, we've got an energy secure country because you can't have energy without water, but also we've got a food secure country. That nexus is the approach that we all must embrace, understand, learn more. You know, somebody said there was a year in Cuba where nobody went to school. Schools were closed because it was everybody teach another. I think that would be a kind of, if I was given the country for a day or for a year, I would say for 3 months, everybody needs to teach everybody about patriotism, about value of our resources, about what it means to be a South African, what it means to take care, the rule of law, our constitution. You know, those are the key things that if you don't understand that, it doesn't matter what else, you really will miss the real points. Thank you.
And look, you've made such important points, Jennifer. And I guess on the one hand, it's being able to improve the levels of trust, especially in institutions in government at a local level, because once that gets better, then people are able to trust the products that are coming out of government, especially with water. On the other hand, of course, there's the issue of the aspirational lifestyle.
Yeah.
So people are more than willing to pay 100 rand for what looks like a fancy bottle of water,
Yeah.
depending on what the
Yeah.
occasion is,
Mm.
then perhaps they sometimes are for
Yeah.
water coming out of their taps, and that's really around how it's positioned. But
Mm.
Yeah.
let me give you a chance then
Yeah.
to speak to us about what you believe the key things that we can do to turn the tide might be as we get ready
Yeah.
to wrap up this
Okay.
part of our conversation.
Look. Certainly and I think enough has been said about we need to improve governance, but we also
Yeah.
need to understand what about governance do we improve. I mean, we'll have speakers talk about culture eat strategy for breakfast, and we'll say that implementation of
Yeah.
strategy and or oversight is what our board should be doing. Let's change the focus to impact.
Yeah.
We must as organizations we must achieve more impact, not necessarily less focus on compliance, but let's focus on impact, what we really are trying to achieve. So let's improve our governance, let's monitor and improve our performance, and certainly we need to improve our accountability at all levels,
Sure.
as professionals, as stakeholders, and as government. Let's improve our accountability and make sure that Joe Citizen can see we are playing our part so that they can play their part.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a good note then to round it off, at least for our first conversation within
Yes.
this hour.
Yeah.
Let me thank you so much for being part of
Thank
the
you.
conversation. And of course, there you had Jennifer Mohlahlana, who is the Water Resource Commission CEO. And she was alongside Dr. Lester Goldman, who is of course also a part of the Water Institute of South Africa. He is the CEO there, and I hope that what they're saying is something that also resonates with you. Right, on the one hand, we know that the state of water is what it is because there have been these challenges when it comes to capacitating officials at a local government level. We have seen not only the destruction of infrastructure. Think about how many times we've had service delivery protests and infrastructure has been destroyed, but we also have had poor maintenance of that infrastructure that leads to a buildup of a plethora of issues that affect our ability to secure water as a resource. So those then were the views of our first guest for this media couch. As we continue in the hour, we're going to hear from more of our guests. Joining us next will be joined by Dr. Nonhlanhla Kalibaila, who's going to be speaking about the issue of water quality and health. Again, this is one of the big issues that we're confronted with, right? Because if people don't trust water as a resource, and if we don't have access to safe, clean drinking water, then it affects our health. Think about what happened in Hammanskraal and the cholera outbreak that affected community members there. How long were the people of Hammanskraal complaining about the quality of their water? And yet it seemed that the national focus and the national impetus to actually do something about it came after the cholera outbreak. So the impact of not taking care of our water resources really has such a wide ranging effect. And that is something that we absolutely must pay attention to. Of course, this is a live stream from our media couch here in partnership with the Mail and Guardian and the Water Research Commission. You also have the opportunity of putting your questions and comments in the chat box. Please do go ahead and pop whatever your thoughts and views on this conversation are as I get ready then to invite our next guest. He's just walking onto set and he's going to be coming to take a seat right next to me. Dr. Nonhlanhla. All right, Dr. Dr. Nonhlanhla is still on the way, and Dr. Nonhlanhla will be joining us shortly for the rest of our conversation.
You go first.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon to
Welcome to
you.
the couch.
Thank
It's
you.
a pleasure hosting you on our couch this afternoon. Of course, now we're joined by Dr. Nonhlanhla Kalibaila, who is with the Water Research Commission. Thank you so much for your time. And Mr. Matikizela, you're also with the Water Research
Yes,
Commission.
please. Thank
Thank you
you.
so much for joining us too. So we're going to shift our conversation then to looking at water quality and health in South Africa. It's one of the key concerns that has come up so far in this conference. What are the issues with regard to water quality and health? Where do we see the biggest problems emerging there?
Okay, thanks for inviting me over. I'm more than happy to share what work we're doing with Water Research Commission on water quality and health. So, water quality is very important because, I mean, we can talk about water availability, but that water has to be available at a certain quantity that allows the water to be used. So, what we're looking at the fitness of that water for the many uses, for the economic uses. As you know, that water is a very big input into the economic activities, and also water is very important for health. Health, we talk about health of the environment, and we also talk about public health and also the health of animals. So it's very important that we make sure that in the research that we do, we keep profiling the water, assess its fitness for use for the various uses that I have mentioned, and also where we detect that there are pollutants or contaminants, then we look at technologies that are able to remove those pollutants or contaminants to make the water safe to use.
People generally feel that water quality is the worst it has ever been because we have more and more people relying on bottled water than ever before. Yes, it's probably a good marketing strategy by the water
Yes.
companies, but is it just reality or perception? Is our water quality worse off today than it was 10 years ago when
Well,
maybe the proliferation of bottled water wasn't as mainstream as it is now?
so generally, when we talk about water quality, let me start with environmental water quality. So environmental water quality, if you look at all the countries in the world, uh, every country that is developed, you would see that there is a correlation with the water quality status, because in most cases you cannot have development or industrialization without really having some impact on water resources, because now we're talking about industries that are taking the water and then they are discharging some of the effluents, the wastewater, into the water resources. So, but I would say that it is very important to put in place. South Africa already has regulations that deal with the water pollution. So, really, if the regulations or the compliance and enforcement is working very well, then really we should not be having a problem. Then let me go into drinking water quality. So, drinking water quality, the production of drinking water is a highly regulated activity. So, we have world class national drinking water standards that are equivalent to the World Health Organization's drinking water quality guidelines. So, every water service institution that is producing drinking water is regulated by the Department of Water and Sanitation. So there is the Blue Drop, which really provides an overview, or these are the audit outlook on how water service institutions are performing in terms of the drinking water quality. So based on the standards that we use, South Africa has world class tap water. Obviously, there are those isolated municipalities where the water does not really meet the drinking water quality standards.
Okay. Mr. Madigizela,
Mm.
your own view on water quality?
Yes, thanks again for the invitation. Let me be very straight and tell you exactly, because it helps us to presenting on this stuff now.
Yes.
So what is there is definitely what I'm going to say to you now.
Okay.
The water resources in this country, from environmental protection point of view, are highly degraded, way beyond 65%. In fact, wetlands is about 85%, which means we are in trouble. And the key thing that we need to do is to focus on restoration. I was very happy because the minister this morning agreed to that and said we do have a problem and we have to work and fix it. In fact, we are already working on it. If I say the water quality is good and then you know about the file system of water letters, obviously you are going to ask me, are you not contradicting yourself?
Yeah.
So we do have eutrophication in this country, very bad, and it's now spreading into rivers.
Mm.
So it is a real serious thing, but we are working on the various innovations to try and reduce that.
When you talk about needing to restore
Mm.
some of our water resources, especially within their natural environments, what does that restoration look like? So, and explain it to me in the simplest terms that you can. Remember,
Yes.
I'm not a water expert. I
Mm-hmm.
don't sit with you
Sure.
in your commissions and understand your job fully. But so if you're to, in very simple terms, explain to
Yes.
me, how does that restoration
If
happen?
you were fishing from that river,
Mm,
or if you were swimming in that dam in the last 10 years or 20, and now you cannot do that anymore,
yeah.
then that means that water needs to be rehabilitated.
Mm,
By the law in South Africa, we call it rehabilitation. But remember, we're working in the international space.
mm.
The popular word there is restoration.
Okay.
If you look at the United Nations call it is on a restoration decade, which is already 6 years now, to restore water resources. In fact, the whole catchment or landscape, because what you see in the river is a mirror of what is happening in the land use, in the catchment. You see, no river just turns out on its own to be like that.
Yes.
Somebody in the catchment has released the nutrients, which means then you enrich these plants and they grow very fast, like water hyacinth, water lettuce, and there are others. It's a big five actually.
So, what does the process of restoration look like? What do we need to do?
In this case, we have to bring buffer zones, for example. Buffer zone is allowing the natural vegetation along the water courses to grow, and they do the natural filtration. Hence, we then call it nature-based solution because we are using nature to solve the problem and to actually take it back to how it looked like before. In many cases, it's almost impossible. Hence, we talk of reclamation, remediation. If you can restore, it means that's the last step to bring it back to its natural role. It's not always possible, especially in urban systems.
Mm.
Let's talk about again this idea of restoration, and I would imagine this is where a lot of the innovation really needs to come in, because if it's that river that people used to swim in 10 years ago, today it's probably full of plastic,
Mm.
it's full of nappies and all
Mm.
sorts of other things that shouldn't be in rivers. Communities write it off. We don't think about the fact that it can be restored to what it once was before. So, what is the work that you would say that the commission and people like yourselves are involved in bringing that awareness around the need to actually rehabilitate some of these water resources and their environments?
Okay.
I
He's,
can take it if
yeah, I
you
was
want.
saying that he's going to come in about the rehabilitation, but I want to
Sure.
talk about, before we even get there,
Yes.
it is very important that we raise awareness on pollution prevention. Because, I mean, if we
Raise
care,
awareness on pollution
prevention.
prevention.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Because, I mean, if we prevent pollution from the source, then we will not get to the stage where we now need to rehabilitate and then restore our
Mm.
water resources. So it's very important to also educate the public that they also participate in the pollution. So it's very important that waste management, we raise awareness around waste management, and also to also sensitize people that, I mean, water is a cycle. The water that you are throwing stuff into today is the same water that downstream is going to be collected and treated for drinking water purposes. So over the last 2 years, we have been working with the Department of Forestry and Fisheries to develop national action plans on the management of chemicals in the environment, to look at the responsibility of different institutions, and also to also educate and raise awareness amongst the public. Because, for instance, some of the chemicals that we're using in our households, they are some of the most difficult to treat chemicals that we
Sure.
encounter in the wastewater treatment works. And if they are not treated there, then they escape into the rivers, and then they are then collected or abstracted, and then that same water is then treated for drinking water process, drinking water. So, but
Yeah.
if we can stop it from just from the point of consumption by the public, then it will be easier.
It sounds to me that there needs to be also a whole of industry approach, right? Because if you're having companies that are producing products that are difficult to treat further down the line, then they also have to be part of the solution. Because as long as it's available on the shelves,
Yes.
people are going to buy it.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
correct. That's correct.
Exactly. That's exactly the point. You talk about plastics. Yes, the presentation is going to talk about these plastics.
Yeah.
And when you look at these plastics, you ask yourself, but where are they coming from?
Mm.
Who dropped the plastic somewhere? And it is us, it is the citizens. That's why we are now having a program on citizen science,
Mm.
which is empowerment of the communities, public, everybody, business, to create awareness for action and change. You see, so the issue of restoration or rehabilitation very quickly. If you have seen Hattis Dam, Hattis Sports Dam,
I actually wanted to use it
eh,
as an example
right,
because there has been a struggle around
Yes,
restoring
yes.
Harties to what it
The-
used to be.
there you are. Now we actually have a strategy. Department of Water and Sanitation has produced another strategy on how to rehabilitate eutrophication in dams. One of the things you should probably know is mechanical removal. We remove the plant itself,
Yeah.
the hyacinth or lettuce mechanically, or we use chemicals, we spray and the thing dies, or we use biological control. We release beetles called weevils. Obviously, no one will substitute another. All of them need to be there as like seamlessly,
Mm.
because when you get rid of hyacinth, you open up for sunlight, and then the algae just comes out very strong because now they can photosynthesize. They just spread as well. So it's a problem after another problem. But the key thing is, what is the source? Because you are now dealing with the symptoms.
Mm.
Close the tap and then you can remove the dirt.
Yeah.
Now, the dysfunctional wastewater treatment works are pushing far more nutrients into the systems. And of course,
Ah.
there are non-point sources of pollution
Mm.
from the catchment. Could be agriculture, could be in industry, could be someone in a farm. They are the consequences of what they are doing also as here. But the main culprit that we have identified is a dysfunctional wastewater works, because it just brings nutrients, nitrates and phosphates are the main drivers of what you see in the Hatties.
So this one I'm going to ask then on behalf of the people in Hartis
Yes.
and myself, because every time I drive
Oh,
past there, I just I look at that green over the water and I think,
yes.
is this ever going to change? Are we ever going to be able to restore the Hartis Dam to what it used to be?
Fortunately, we have a workshop on the 20th of
Yes.
June, which is next 2 weeks. And
Okay.
we are talking about, for more than, I don't know, it must be 30 years or more
Yeah.
of this problem.
Mm.
What other innovations can we bring in to solve this problem? So we are looking at different things that you have never seen before. And we hope that the workshop will give us brilliant ideas, and
Yes.
then we can find something that makes sense so that we can solve this problem.
Is it becoming a global case study now? Is this
It
the
is.
kind of thing that's keeping all of you going to say, if we can solve this problem, we would have cracked a big one, not just for South Africa, but also for the rest of the world?
Yes, eutrophication is
Mm.
everyone, everywhere in the world there is eutrophication. As I said, that if you having so much nutrients come into the system,
Mm.
then you're going to have all sorts of plants growing in your dams, like you were saying that now it's even transferring into the rivers.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, let me thank you both for your time. I know you've got to go because you're going to be presenting in the main
Yes.
hall in a moment. I
Mm.
appreciate it, Mr. Madikizela, joining us there for his contributions and insight, and of course also alongside Dr. Nonhlanhla Kalibaila, both of them with the Water Research Commission. So absolutely, you heard there about the importance of making sure that our water quality is up to scratch, the impact that it has on our health. And of course, unfortunately, I didn't get a lot of time to touch on the issue of health, because there are some good examples that we have,
Thank you,
as I was
Laura.
mentioning earlier, cholera in Hammanskraal. These are the
Yeah.
innovations that the industry experts are working on to ensure that we are able to continue preserving water as a resource. What do you think the people in Hartebees are going through now as the embankment of the dam? You wanted to see the beautiful views, and now what do you have? Well, not so great views. Undoubtedly, probably also has an impact on the prices of property in that area too, because what you bought is just not what you're living with now. But all of it symptomatic, as you heard there, of water infrastructure that is not fully functional. So, in order to treat the symptom of the problem, we have to get back to what has actually created the problem in the first place. And that is probably then going to be the bigger challenge, that we need this shift towards implementation. But you and I also have to be changing our views. You and I also have to be changing our mindsets around how we treat water as a resource. You're watching the Mail and Guardian. We're, of course, on the couch. It's a media couch partnership between the Mail and Guardian and the Water Research Council. It's at the inaugural, at the biannual rather, conference held by the Water Institute of South Africa. Well, let's continue then with our conversation. Up next, we're going to invite Dr. Tlhagale from the Water Research Commission and Professor Oman from WaterNet. Oh, I see we've got Mr. Jean Marie. They've switched the guests. Apologies for that. So, is it- sorry? Yes, yes, yes. No, that's what I said. Apologies. Prof. Jean Marie, with you, of course, we're going to be talking about the impact of partnerships in driving the SADC research agenda and the capacity building in water and sanitation. Dr. Kahali, good afternoon to you as well. Thank you for being able to join this conversation.
Thanks, Kathy.
South Africa, particularly as a country, we know that our water survival is dependent on the region. We cannot make it without some of our neighboring countries. And yet, in the same breath, they too are in the region. So, the water scarcity that we face, surely they must face as well. What is the holistic view of water in the SADC region?
No, thank you. Thank you for affording us the opportunity to be on set with you this afternoon.
Sure.
Water is life. But you know, water goes beyond our administrative boundaries, as you've just said. And when we look at the SADC region, if there's a resource that we share beyond our administrative boundaries, is water. And as a result, our head of state have understood that if we want to talk about development, we need to cooperate around water resources. And how do we cooperate if we don't have a sound understanding of what is happening? So what's happening is that our vision as a SADC, we know that we've got the 2050 SADC vision. And within the 2050 SADC vision, we have one pillar that focuses on human and institutional capacity development. Because without the capacity, there is no actually means of implementation. So as a result, a research agenda for the water sector has been put in place in order to inform which are the areas where more knowledge need to be generated in order to better appreciate and understand water resources, especially across borders, because when you talk about SADC, you're looking at 16 countries. So an agenda looking at the priority of our SADC regional indicative strategic development plan is then used to unlock the water potential. Because unless we've got the right understanding, we cannot effectively manage our water resources.
What would you say the biggest challenge to this partnership, to this cooperation within the SADC region is? Because ultimately, yes, water may be our shared resource, but you have states, and all of them are acting in their own interests. They're putting their interests first above that of their next door neighbor. That's how it works in international relations. So what does that then bring when we're talking about water?
Yeah, it is a bit of a challenge because every state has its own policies and regulatory mechanisms. However, there's also platforms where, for example, ministers of water in the SADC region can meet, or even the African as a whole. So I think the issue of synergy, coordination of different national policies for the sake of the region it's really necessary, and we need to work together, because if one does it well, or a few countries, and the other doesn't, it affects all of us, as we're saying. So I think it's very important that we use the existing structures, because they are there, of our ministers in the SADC region for water, to talk about how we can find synergy, and maybe try and align some of the national policies, so that we really work towards this common goal of integrated water resource management, and also making sure that we protect this important resource that we are having.
Where would you say the greatest challenge in creating these synergies lies right now?
I think it's the issue of all of us wanting our own to be the one.
Yes.
So we need to just let go of that a bit, and then look at the greater good that we want to do for our region. It's not about your country's policy or regulation coming up front, but which one will help us to really work on this thing. So I think that issue of we are a region, but we still operate very much so as different countries. It just
Yeah.
has to improve, because we can't make it if we are still working in silo, and we are fragmented as a SADC region.
Prof. Jean Marie, what would you say are the biggest challenges to this synergy right now?
Uh, you see, when you look at the governance and institutional setup, we talk about harmonization of some of the policies. You know, we're talking about water resources, for instance. Right now, at SADC level, for instance, we don't have a policy that cross cuts the regional boundaries. So, for instance, water in the Limpopo coming from Botswana, Zimbabwe, getting into South Africa, you have no policy about the quality that is coming from one country to the other country. So, as much as we've got a shared SADC protocol on water resources, but we haven't been able to operationalize some of these policies that are more like guidelines. But we need more operational tools to actually make sure that the issue of water are actually being addressed. Because you see, water is this vital dimension. We can have nice rhetorics, but what people want is clean water coming out of their taps. So it's the operational part, it's your reticulation design that need to be looked into, so that at the end of the day, we can say that the management of the water resources is adequate.
Water management is about governance at the heart of it. And if you're talking about streams that are flowing across from Botswana into South Africa, already there's a potential issue there, because if I raise an issue with the quality of water I'm getting upstream, or I'm receiving downstream from a water resource that's coming from you, then I'm saying something about your governance. Is that what makes it difficult? Is that now we must tiptoe around each other because leaders don't want to step on people's toes, don't want to say the wrong thing, and how do we then move and push for development in what can potentially be a politically difficult situation to maneuver?
I must say that as SADC region,
Mm.
we are very fortunate to have what we call the river basin organizations. Because what the river basin organization are doing, like on the Limpopo, on the Orasecom, with water coming from Lesotho into South Africa, Namibia, at least we have that platform where, in terms of policies, they try to harmonize. But the only thing that we must appreciate is that they don't always have that executive power. It's a commission, but the decision makers are still government. You know, so they don't have that executive power. In fact, the power still lies with the ministries within the respective countries. So maybe to solve some of those transboundary issues, one of the way would be to empower more some of these regional basin organizations in the way they operate currently. Because one would say, right now they're a bit toothless. You know, they don't have what it takes
Yeah.
to change things on the ground.
Yeah, yeah.
Dr. Kahale, what else would you say is working in the region that perhaps we need to build more on?
I think the fact that Prof is mentioning that there's systems or organizations already formed which are functional, at least there's a willingness from each member state to be part of this union. But the I think having that is very important. But then also, what could be improved maybe is to, he's talking about the issue of the text, the innovation, the solution. So you find, for example, Oresacom, there's different knowledge and innovation existing in different member states that are part of Oresacom, but somehow we don't share. We don't learn together as a region. So I think because the structure is there, we need to find a way that we can hook the knowledge generators and the innovation providers to support the structures so that they then get the latest knowledge, the innovations, and we also help with issues of capacity, obviously, because then people need to be capacitated to be able to take up the knowledge and the innovation solutions that exist. But for the fact that we are together as commissions, the different commissions, I think it's a good thing. And all the member states are really active in thing. So it's a good thing. We must just build up on that structure and make sure that we equip, we skill, and we share whatever is existing to see the benefit.
Would you say that there's a level of horse trading that has to take place in these commissions? Because again, if you're Lesotho, you're sitting there thinking, if you're mean to me, I'm going to deal with you, South Africa. So, do you have that come into play
No.
in the commissions where you do find, again, these are states, and by design, it's to act in their own interests, and unfortunately,
Yeah, but you see, the way water is looked at in the region, it's more as a tool of cooperation.
okay.
You know, because at the end of the day, as much as you're upstream, you also need your downstream country. You know, it's true they rely on the water coming from you, but maybe in terms of other resources, when you look at what we say a systemic approach, you also need your downstream. So there's always that trade-off that you might need to look at. And that brings us to the issue of solving water problem. It's not always about solving it within the water sector. It's a systemic issue because sometimes for you to reduce your water use consumption, for instance, in irrigation, is to buy food where it's being grown. So instead of using it directly, then you buy virtual water. So when we look at water, it should be looked in a systemic way. Because look, sometimes the water that you're allowing to go downstream will generate electricity that can come back to you. So there's always that element that one need to look at carefully when you look at water resources.
All right.
Because the tendency is to look at the natural resources without actually looking at all the associated aspects.
There's so much more that goes into it.
Yeah.
Dr. Kahali, your parting shot.
Just with the issues of the commissions, I think we're there. We just need to just strengthen a bit of the governance and support our commissions with regards to the knowledge and innovations. But I think there's also an element of we focused on the commission here, but the partnership between the Water Research Commission and WaterNet, it actually talks about capacitating the young people in the water sector. And we do that through master classes, capacity development training, winter schools. They host, the WaterNet host an annual symposium, which we are partnering with them every year. So we ensure that we support these young people, either the student, the learners, or the young water professionals, to be engaged in these water conversations and also in the discussions where we're talking about solutions for the future water security of our continent. So the parting words would be we appreciate the partnership with WaterNet. it, and it is working. We just need to find a way to support our commissions, because I think together we can be able to support them with the knowledge and the skills and the technologies that they require to improve their water management in the commission.
Dr. Mamutloding Tlhagale, let me thank you for your time on our special couch today. She's, of
Thank
course,
you.
with the Water Research Commission, and Professor Jean-Marie Kilishe Onima is with WaterNet. Let me thank you for your time on our couch as well this afternoon.
Thank
you very
you for
much.
affording us the opportunity.
Sure.
Thank you,
And that's where we leave it with those particular guests. And it's quite interesting to hear how integrated we are as a region when it comes to the use of water. And, definitely good to hear that there are commissions that are working alongside each other to improve the cooperation when it comes to water. But absolutely, there's no questioning the fact that there's a lot of negotiating that happens and that has to happen at a country level to ensure that there is synergy and everybody is willing to move in the same direction. What we heard earlier on was that water was critical to development. And that's not just the development of South Africa, is the development of the region as a whole. And what we do know is that the SADC region, by and large, incredibly water scarce. So our water precarity as a country is not just limited to us, it's also extended to some of the countries in the region too. So we have to do what we can, but they have to do what they can too. We all have to work together to try and bring in joint solutions. I certainly hope that there are some insights that you're taking from this conversation and also from our media couch here at the Wisa conference. And of course, our couch today is in partnership with the Mail and Guardian and also the Water Resource Commission. So our final look through, our final topic for discussion is going to be around developing an empowerment ecosystem towards the efficient state of municipalities in South Africa. And the issue of municipalities came up earlier on in the afternoon because it really speaks to governance and the ability to implement the policies that we have. She's just sneaked in onto my couch. Dr. Valerie Naidu is with the Water Research Commission. Dr. Naidu, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
So, ultimately, we've got the region that plays a role, we've got the country that plays a role. But as a resident, it is my local municipality that is going to ensure that all of this work comes together to provide me with clean drinking water in my tap at the end of the day. What would you say is the state of water quality, water provision at a local level? What are the challenges that we're seeing there?
So I think definitely we could be better. And we've seen a backtracking in terms of water quality across municipalities. Uh, what we're seeing is essentially some metros or larger municipalities being able to retain water quality. In other words, we've always had a great relationship of it being able to drink from the tap. However, as water resources become more and more constrained, we're using alternate sources of water. And municipalities now have to become more adept at not just how do I treat surface water, but how do I treat groundwater? How do I bring on board other types of water? And then how do I work with my communities to make sure they're aware, even from a self supply point of view, that they're able to have high quality water, or should I say, SANS 241 drinking water quality?
Thank you for joining us too. You've just snuck in there. Mr. Luyaba and Mr. Lubabalo Luyaba is with Salga. We're focusing for this aspect of our conversation on water delivery and municipalities. This is really your bread and butter as Salga. What would you say the state of water quality has been at a local level? What are the issues when it comes to the delivery and the management of water at a local government level is?
Thank you. I think the first is to acknowledge that, as my colleague has said, there's much improvement that is required. We are not where we need to be. and there's a lot of hard work that lay ahead of us. But there's also pockets of success that we can look to sort of replicate and grow. In terms of challenges, I think from the work we've been doing with the Water Research Commission, we have a very clear understanding of what is wrong, what needs to be done, how it can be done, and how we can sustain it. There's challenges at the level of skills in municipalities, but that challenge is three pronged. There's the ability to attract skills, to afford skills, and to retain skills for different types of municipalities. And obviously, if you don't have the right people, it becomes nearly impossible for you to do what you need to do. And the second, and there's a lot, but the second and last one that I'll mention is around financing. Municipalities are not always able to afford the solutions that they need, but also end users cannot afford always to pay for the services rendered. And so you have this situation where you have a service that requires you to have money to provide in a sustainable and reliable manner, but the money to do that is not there, notwithstanding that we could improve on efficiency as municipalities, as evidenced by high non-revenue water. But it's a very complex problem, but we're assured by having a partner such as the Water Research Commission that is continuously trying to help us to understand the nature of the challenges that we're dealing with in all of its complexity.
So solving the water problem at a municipal level is also around resources, if I'm hearing you correctly, because as long as you have municipalities that are unable to fund their budgets, then we're going to keep having the repetition of the cycle.
Yeah, that is the case,
Mm.
and therefore the challenge is municipalities, as you would know, if we just talk as service as residents, municipalities must consider affordability.
Mm.
And with affordability, there comes issues like willingness to pay and ability to pay. And there's another nuance of course, inefficiency,
Yeah.
where things are not being done as efficiently as possible. So that mixture in funding is a fairly complex one, but a big one. We talk about South Africa being an unequal country, the economy not growing, high levels of unemployment. What that means is that more and more people actually cannot afford to pay. So the question is, how do we continue to provide services in that context?
Yeah. Valerie, water management at a local level is one of the sectors that seems to have really taken a serious knock, right?
Mm.
So you've got in the at least as the end consumer, then if you don't have clean drinking water, it's the treatment plant that suddenly is not working, that is broken down, it's not doing what it used to do before. What is at the heart of that problem? Why are we seeing
So,
what is a perceived deterioration of our water treatment works?
So I think again, this is multi-pronged. One, I think the water budget is not a ring fence budget. So you may pay to your municipality, but it's not ring fence. So the requirements in terms of investment for refurbishments, in terms of investment for operations and maintenance, is not there. And I think if you go across, you'll see that sometimes municipalities can have 1%, in terms of operations and maintenance, when it should be 10%.
Sure.
And so we're not putting enough budgets. But I think the other aspect is around the resourcing. So we need professionals that understand water quality, so water quality specialists. Remember, water, when we're treating it, it is removing a lot of contaminants from water, biological contaminants in terms of pathogens. That's why we don't get waterborne disease and we don't get sick. Chemical contaminants. Now, in terms of existing chemicals, we're also starting to look at emerging contaminants. So the business of water has to always be progressive. And so your water quality specialists have to be trained to reach the SANS 241 as it stands at the moment, but even in the future, are we finding microplastics and pharmaceuticals in our water? Do we know how to measure them? What methods to use? Are our professionals in our labs equipped to do the analysis? So there's various things to look at, but I think in addition to that, we must also be aware that to some extent, in the water sector, in addition to dealing with emerging contaminants and the finances, there's also about the infrastructure, the access to infrastructure to move water and to get it to a household tap. And that for us has been, we've moved backwards in terms of the investment, but it's also coming from the constraint on the resources.
Sure.
So we recently saw in Gauteng, people having a bit more shortage. It's linked to reservoir, it's linked to allocations, it's linked to us as individuals as well. Are we using too much water in areas? Are we not making tough decisions around swimming pools, for example? Are we basically reducing the amount of water we use for our daily activities?
Yeah.
I think there's digital tools that can change our behaviors. And I think we need a national conversation around water efficiency and water reduction. And that needs to be a national campaign. And I often say that it's not each individual to do its own. Maybe we need to come together and say this is a national campaign
All right.
that actually reduces water, increases water efficiency, drives businesses to take on far more water efficient technologies and behaviors as well in terms of building sustainability in our communities, in our households, in our businesses as well.
I've got a question here from one of our guests who is watching the session online. I don't know if you're going to be able to answer it. I'll just put it out there nonetheless. It's a question from Maredi Matlomoja, who wants to know what is being done to monitor the level of effluent into the Vaal River and measures to mitigate water lettuce. Does anybody want to have a go at that one?
So I don't know if you want to.
We'll both take bites. I think a
Sure.
lot is being done at various levels. I think the reintroduction of the Green Job program is one such initiative, and it's incentive-based regulation, which is slightly different to the typical type of regulation that's been done, where municipalities can sort of see how they're doing relative to their peers, etc., etc. I think the department has also been very strict in terms of enforcement action. We recently saw action being taken against municipalities that are not doing what they ought to be doing in terms of the conditional grants, because some of the municipalities that deposit into that specific system are reliant on conditional grants. There's been changes in those conditional grants to allow municipalities, if and when they have an emergency that's related to sewage pollution, to be able to divert funding to do emergency repairs and maintenance to deal with that problem. Again, we've also been doing work on the training and capacitation of process controllers, such that the systems that need to be working are kept functional. And there's various strategies being looked at in terms of dealing with issues of theft and vandalism, because sometimes the issues that we have that result in sewer spillages are as a result of infrastructure being stolen or vandalized. So strategies to sort of try and deal with that are being put in place. But I must concede that the impact of all of that will take some time. And I would understand the impatience of the public as they would feel that nothing is being done. But because these problems are so long standing, we cannot reasonably expect them to be resolved overnight.
What's a long time?
To be very honest,
Mm.
and I'm not giving you a political answer, it depends.
Yeah.
It depends on the nature of the problem that you're dealing with. So if you look at river bodies, depending on the extent of damage that has been done to the system, you could stop pollution right now, but the return of aquatic life could take
Yeah.
years sometimes because the damage has been happening over a period of years. So it's really contextually dependent, and I would be dishonest if I were to give you
Sure.
an exact answer.
All right, Valerie.
Yeah, so I think the issue of maybe trying to improve the wastewater treatment works and improve the effluent quality that is being discharged, that is something is maybe short to medium term as an intervention. Fixing sewers, making sure there's no overflows, those sorts of things are more short to medium term. But once you have put a lot of nitrogen and phosphates into the river system, that's a much more longer term journey. And there you have to rehabilitate and restore. So normally we have budgets for a lot of capex infrastructure, but very rarely do we have a lot of budget for restoration.
Yeah.
And I think that's where government has to commit. Once we have done the damage, our water is precious. These water bodies like the Vaal system is very precious. How do we also put the effort towards rehabilitating and restoring those water body systems?
As we get ready then to wrap up this conversation, how would you say that the partnership between the Water Research Commission and SALGA has helped in terms of not only creating insights into understanding the problems, but also then helping to develop solutions?
So I think from our side, it's been a very positive and proactive relationship in the sense that we've essentially worked together on very needs based types of projects. And then we've designed projects that actually answer some of the needs of Salga and the different municipalities. So I can name a few examples where we've done the municipal benchmarking initiative. We've looked at perception studies so that municipalities are aware that while we as technical people look at chemical results, it's really about the user and
Yes,
how are they
yes,
perceiving their
yes,
water quality.
absolutely.
And let's be more aware that the more we give them grounds to distrust,
Yeah.
it is more difficult to get the right perception around your water quality. And I think more recently we've worked on tech and innovation platforms so that we can create a culture of innovation and get more innovation out there, whether it's green tech or more innovative ways in which to treat water or treat wastewater.
All right. Lubabalo?
In very simple terms, I think I'd use past, present, and future. Our relationship with the Water Research Commission has helped us to understand what has been, to understand what is happening now, and to prepare us for the future. The study that my colleague is talking about runs over 15 years, and what it tells us is that over time, people's willingness to pay is decreasing because people feel the level of quality of service they're getting is also decreasing. So things like that empower us as municipalities to really know what to focus on in order to restore that relationship of trust and improve the quality of services in the interest of all end users and the environment.
Lubabalo Lubaya of Salga, thank you so much for your time and for joining us on the rightfully blue couch today. And of course, Dr. Valerie
Thank
Naidu
you.
with the Water Research Commission, thank you for your contributions as well. So I trust that we have really learned a lot from the insight shared by our experts. But the key message is that the way in which we use water is going to have to change if we are indeed to preserve this precious resource, not only for this generation, but most importantly for the generations to come. And we all have to start changing our mindsets around how we can begin to use water differently. Thank you so much for joining us on the Blue Couch today at the Durban ICC in partnership with the Mail and Guardian and the Water Research Commission. That's where we'll leave it with today's live stream.